The sea was calm that morning, so still it looked like glass. The horizon melted into the sky, and for a moment, Ben Keller couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. He'd always found comfort in that stillness. Beneath the waves, life made sense. There were no voices, no deadlines, no noise, just the rhythm of his own heartbeat and the steady pull of the ocean. He had been diving along the Adriatic coast for over a decade. Shipwrecks, coral walls, forgotten anchors, he'd seen them all. But Ben wasn't a treasure hunter. He dove for silence, for the way the sea stripped everything away, leaving only thought and breath. That September morning, as he loaded his small boat off the coast of Puglia, he remembered a story an old fisherman had told him at the marina a few days earlier. "There's something strange under there," the man had said, lowering his voice. "Looks like part of a house. But who builds a house under the sea?" Most people laughed it off. Ben didn't. He dropped anchor a few hundred meters offshore, strapped on his tank, and descended slowly through the sunlight-streaked water. The first 10 meters were familiar fish darting between rocks, shimmering scales catching the light. But at around 20 meters, something shifted. The seafloor leveled out, smooth and barren. And then, he saw it. At first, he thought it was just a rock formation, but rocks didn't form right angles. He swam closer. The structure rose from the seabed, covered in algae and coral, but unmistakably built. Its walls were rectangular, connected, cleanly cut from large stone blocks. His pulse quickened. He traced his gloved hand along one wall, olive gray stone, weathered but intact. Turning the corner, he froze. There, carved perfectly into the structure, was an arched doorway. The top half was still intact, its edges softened by time. Ben hovered in front of the entrance, his flashlight cutting through the dark water. He half expected a fish to dart out or something older, but the opening remained still, silent. He could feel the pressure of the deep pressing around him, the hum of the sea in his ears. When he surfaced 40 minutes later, he tore off his mask and stared back at the waves. His breath came slow and heavy. This wasn't coral or a wreck. This was architecture. Over the next few days, he returned again and again. Each dive revealed more. Perfect geometry, intact walls, a layout too deliberate to be chance. It wasn't huge, about the size of a small cottage, but it was solid, purposeful. Inside, he found narrow ledges, etched markings, and what looked like a sunken floor, as though someone had once walked here. Yet there were no signs of life. No pottery, no relics, no debris. Just precision. Ben sent photos to a historian he knew in Bari. Her reply came the next day. "It's not Roman, not Byzantine. Nothing in that region should look like this." The words only deepened the mystery. What kind of structure could survive decades underwater? And why was it built there in the first place? 2 days later, Ben returned, this time with purpose. He carried a portable sonar scanner and small fluorescent markers to map the structure. Dive after dive, he pieced together its geometry like a puzzle. The outer walls were intact, the inner ones thinner, forming narrow passages and what appeared to be a central chamber. The building wasn't ancient ruin, it was deliberate design. But the most curious discovery came on his fourth dive. Near the center of the chamber, half buried under sand, he spotted a rectangular metal plate. Its corners rounded, almost industrial. Carefully, he brushed the silt away. A faint indentation finger grips. It looked like a hatch. He tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge, sealed tight by decades of salt and pressure. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. The sound of the sea filled his head, the memory of that metal surface flashing behind his eyes. What could be locked inside a submerged building that wasn't a wreck? The next morning, he called his old friend Luca, a marine engineer. "I need a hand," Ben said simply. 2 days later, they descended together. With epoxy saws and a pry bar, they worked in careful rhythm until the hatch finally groaned open, releasing a muted burst of bubbles from the darkness below. Inside was a hollow chamber, and resting within it, a rectangular box, metallic, sealed, but not locked. They brought it to the surface and opened it slowly on deck. Inside lay waterproof sleeves filled with papers, carefully preserved, some typed, others handwritten. The first sheet stopped Ben cold. Project Vitrum Phase 2, 1972. He stared. 1972 wasn't ancient history. This wasn't a ruin. It was a research site. Flipping through the pages, he found sketches, measurements, and reports stamped by a marine research institute in Milan. Each document detailed an experiment, an underwater psychological chamber designed to study human emotion and silence under pressure. It had been an architectural and scientific collaboration, a prototype for a new kind of therapy. Volunteers spent hours, even nights, submerged inside the structure, documenting how the deep sea affected their mental state. They had called it the House of Stillness. Ben contacted the institute. To his surprise, someone replied: Professor Olivia Mancini, one of the original researchers. She was now retired, living quietly in Genoa. When he met her 2 weeks later, she was moved to tears seeing his photograph. "We never thought anyone would find it again," she said softly. That place, it wasn't meant for science alone. It was meant to teach people how to listen, not to each other, but to themselves. She showed him faded pictures of the project divers sitting cross-legged inside the chamber, surrounded by silence. "We learned," she said, "that when the world is loud, the sea can become a mirror." Funding had ended before they could finish their work. The facility was sealed and left to the ocean, forgotten until now. Days later, Ben dove one last time. He entered the chamber alone just as those volunteers had decades before. The water swayed gently around him, the walls shimmered like silver glass. He sat cross-legged on the floor, closed his eyes, and felt the deep hum of the ocean in his chest. For a moment, the world above disappeared and all that remained was stillness. The experiment hadn't failed. It had simply waited for someone ready to understand it.